Hi guys, good morning. How is everyone doing today? Another new week, our third week in A level. I hope that everyone is doing well, is catching up well with the subject. All right, now let's begin for today. So, just a bit of recap. So, last week we covered about experimental method. I teach you lab, field, and quasi. And then I also teach you one non-experimental methods, which is observation, which again, there's three types of observation. Control observation, naturalistic observation, and participant observation. Okay, so for today, I'm going to finish up the non-experimental method. I'm going to cover the second one, the third one, and the fourth one. Okay, so there's fourth non-experimental method. Now, the second non-experimental method here in the slide is self-report. From the word itself, it already explained what it means. It means that the participants are reporting the data themselves. Okay, so if we go through the definition there, it's a research method which obtain data by asking participants to provide information about themselves. So basically, researcher would ask the information and then participant give out the information themselves. Okay, so self-report ada dua. We have interview and questionnaire, which are both very familiar to you. I'm pretty sure that you have experienced interview before, and also you have experienced filling in questionnaire before. So this is quite straightforward because you already know this method. So interview is basically direct verbal questioning of the subject by the researcher. It's using verbal. Questionnaire is written. Okay, so written method of gaining data from the subject that does not necessarily require the presence of the researcher. Usually questionnaire they just give it out. Researcher doesn't have to be there while you're doing the questionnaire. Okay, so self-report ada dua, interview and questionnaire. Okay, now we're moving on to the types of interview. So there's three types of interview here: structured, unstructured, and semi-structured. Now, structured mean the question are pre-prepared and every participant receive the same question in the same order. So meaning that the question are fixed. So they have to follow the script of the question and every participant should be given the same question in the same order. Okay? And rating scale are structured question too. So I think you would know how a rating scale looks like, right? Where you are given question where you have to rate on a scale of 1 to 7, for example. Okay? So those are structured question. Unstructured mean it's the opposite to structured. Unstructured artinya there's no pre-preparation of question and question are asked depending on the direction in which the discussion goes. So it means that the question are spontaneous. It's up to the researcher to come up with the question on the spot during the interview. Okay, so for example, like participant 1 will be asked about their lifestyle, participant 2 will be asked about work life, participant 3 may be about family. So different participant will receive different question depending on how the discussion goes. Okay, um, question are asked with the intention of accumulating a large variety of responses. So it means that if different participants receive different question, they would have more variety of answers. Okay, so format is flexible. It consists of open-ended question, hence large amount of data can be obtained. So usually the question that they give are open-ended, which I will define later. I will explain apa open-ended question in it. So point is, kalau unstructured, the data are usually a lot because the question are different from different for different participant. Okay, and then the third types of interview is semi-structured. Semi-structured mean it's mixed. It's the combination of both structured and unstructured. So I believe kalau your oral English exam, they're using semi-structured where awal-awal they follow the question in the question script first, and then usually they would towards the end they would ask random question according to how the discussion goes. So that is an example of semi-structured it includes both fixed question and spontaneous question. Okay, so 3 types of interview. Now this one, I don't know why I put there test yourself, but it's not correct. It just basically I wanted to show you how interview question looks like. So it goes like that lah. Macam this is Kira structured interview where the question are already fixed. Okay, so a yes or no, and then they give you like a multiple choice where you just have to answer verbally lah which one you pick. Okay, and then if you see our the second one, it's also the same thing. It's already fixed. The question are already fixed. So this is an example of structured interview question. Okay. All right. Now we're moving on to questionnaire. Still under self-report, still under the second non-experimental method, which is self-report. So today I said self-report. Under it is interview and questionnaire. Okay, types of questionnaire ada dua, which is open-ended question and closed-ended question. This is quite straightforward saja ni. So question open-ended means that question that asks the participant to give a response in his or her own words. No predetermined ways to answer. So what this means is it's an open question like how are you feeling today? So which means that there's no predetermined way to answer. So there's no multiple choice, yes or no, or happy or sad. You get to answer it in your own words. Okay, how are you feeling today? I'm a bit tired, but I am motivated to study, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that is an example of open-ended where the responses is up to the participant in his or her own words. So open-ended, usually qualitative data. I hope you still remember what qualitative data means. Qualitative data means the data are in words. Okay? So open-ended would give qualitative. Closed-ended question is the opposite. Closed-ended, participants are asked to choose from a range of predetermined answer. So the answer are already fixed. They are already given to you. For example, yes or no, happy or sad. Okay, so in this case, it would be quantitative data where they have to calculate how many say yes, how many say no. So with that, it provides quantitative data, which is data in the form of numbers. Okay, so open-ended is answer in your own words. Closed-ended answer is already predetermined. Okay, so I think it's sanang to understand. It's pretty clear. Okay, now moving on to the third type of non-experimental method, which is case study. So case study, I think, again, it's familiar to everyone. I think a lot of other subject also uses case study, like geography. Okay, case study in psychology is a bit different lah from case study from geography. Okay, case study in psychology, it's a long-term and detailed study of an individual or particular group. Example, single family or institution. So case study long-term, ini artinya it's bata. The study was carried out for a long period of time. For example, like 1 year and above. Okay. So kalau macam 3 months, 1 day, few days, 1 week, 2 weeks, so it's still not a case study. Case study is usually long term, like years. Okay. And it's a very detailed study. Detail means that because it was conducted for a long period of time, obviously the data would be very detailed. Okay. Of an individual, so usually case study ini participantnya one saja. They focuses on one participant or a particular group of participants. For example, one family saja. Or an institution, like they studied one classroom of student. Okay, so case study again focuses usually on one participant saja or one group of people, and it's long term. Okay, and then the second bullet point here, the data is detailed and in-depth and may be obtained using a variety of different techniques. So the data is banyak and it's very detailed and in-depth, And usually they collect the data using different techniques, like they use this interview, they use this observation, they run pakai questionnaire. So different types of ways of collecting of data, okay? And then it's useful for looking at rare cases where a detailed description is useful, and for following developmental changes such as the progress of a child or a person with disorder, okay? Case study is often used in unique cases. For example, a person ini ada phobia. They usually pakai case study because when that happened, they wanted to study the person in depth. Okay? Usually case study ini when they wanted to really gather a good amount of information where they wanted to monitor the developmental changes. So that's why they pakai case study. Okay, so just ingatkan case study is batah. It focuses on one participant saja or a particular group, and the data is very detailed. Okay, so that's the third type of non-experimental method. Okay, now to the last type of non-experimental method, which is the fourth one, is correlation study. I think if you study math, you probably have heard this term before, correlation. Okay, so this is a technique to investigate a link between two measured variables. So usually correlation means you are looking at the relationship of two variables, okay? Correlation are useful when it is possible only to measure the variables rather than manipulate. For example, when the experiment cannot be conducted. So correlation is basically used when you cannot manipulate the variable, okay, because it's not practical and it's not ethical. So the example that I give there, it's not practical and ethical to conduct an experiment of children long-term exposure to TV or effects of real-life exposure to violent TV program. Okay, so imagine if I were to manipulate these variables. So I wanted to study the children's long-term exposure to TV. So I have one group of participant children. I asked them to watch TV for 15 hours. And then I have another group of participant children also. I asked them to watch the TV for 24 hours. Now, when there is this kind of manipulation, it is actually not ethical because you're using real life human here to test out a negative exposure or negative behavior. So when this happens, people will gonna condemn your research as unethical. Okay, it's not right. It's not morally right to manipulate this variable because it will affect the situation. It will affect the participant in a negative way. So when this happens, that's why people use correlation study saja. So basically, you're just measuring the variables without manipulating it, okay? So basically, all you do is you have the children, you just study how long do they watch TV, and then from there, you just make comparison with the other groups of children, okay? I'll give you another example. For example, like eating healthy or eating unhealthy food to sleep. So I wanted to check the relationship of eating unhealthy food to sleep. Okay, so this variable of eating unhealthy food in it, it's not ethical, it's not practical to manipulate. I cannot have one participant to eat unhealthy food for 10 days straight, or even 1 day saja. Asking a person to eat unhealthy food for 1 day, it's unethical because it's damaging the participant. Okay, so when this happens, you cannot manipulate, meaning that you cannot do an experiment on these variables. So you just have to measure the correlation saja. What's the relationship of eating unhealthy food to sleep? Okay. So hence that's why there. However, both can be investigated using correlation. So when you are investigating a negative variables that can have consequences to the participant, you cannot do experiment, you just use correlation saja, okay? But the last bullet point there, Any link found between the two variables in a correlation cannot be assumed to be a causal relationship. Causal relationship means that it's a cause and effect. I hope that you are familiar with this. Cause and effect, meaning that one variable is a cause, it's causing an effect to this other variable. Okay, so any link, any relationship that was gathered in a correlation study, it does not mean that one is causing the other one. Okay, so that is, we cannot know whether the change in one variable is responsible for the change in another variable. So which means that you're looking at variable A and variable B, unhealthy food to sleep. Okay, so when you're studying this relationship, it doesn't mean that unhealthy food affects sleep. You're just measuring the relationship. You're not saying that unhealthy food definitely causes disruption to your sleep. So it's not a causal relationship. Okay, I will give another example in the next slide. Okay, so this is an elaboration again to the points that I made previously, the last point on the slide. So we cannot say from one correlation that an increase in one variable causes an increase in the other, because it is possible that changes in both variables could be the results of another factor. So if we go back to the explanation or the example that I gave just now about eating unhealthy food to sleep, so just because that, for example, the participants somehow, the more they eat unhealthy food, the more the sleep would be disrupted. Okay, so we can see that there is a positive correlation. One variable increases, the other one also increases. But we cannot conclude that, okay, when you eat unhealthy food, you definitely will sleep less because your sleep would be disrupted. So we cannot say that that is the causes of disruption to sleep. Okay, because kenapa? Because there is other factor yang boleh affects your sleeps. For example, mobile phones. Okay, so we cannot simply conclude, okay, definitely unhealthy food causes disruption in sleep. Okay, so that's not how correlation study work. You just say that this, kalau you eat unhealthy food, chances of sleep disruption would also be higher, but we cannot conclude that one is causing the other one to happen. Okay, another example here, imagine two variables are being measured. One is attention in class, one is score on test. So we would hypothesize macam the more you pay attention in class, the more higher your scores would be on the test. Okay, so if these two correlate, if it's true that these two somehow correlate, one is affecting the other, the one increase, the other one increase jua. So it's tempting to say that paying attention in class is responsible for good test results, but we cannot be sure of this. Okay, so because kenapa, again, like I said today, it's possible that both of these factors depend on another factor, such as the dedication of the individual student. So it could be that the results of the test is high because the students are dedicated to their study. Or maybe like another possible factor would be the score is high because the student andangnya pandai, so they are naturally intelligent. So it got less to do with attention, more to do with their level of intelligence. Okay, so the sort of student who pay more attention in class might also study much harder for the tests. Okay, so there could be some student yang anaknya pay attention in class, so therefore they really do well in the study. But again, we cannot be sure that it's definitely only attention that causes this test to give a high score. It could be other factors. Okay, so we can conclude that the two factors we measured vary together, not that there is cause and effect or causal relationship with one another. So we can just conclude that, okay, there is a relationship between attention in class to the score on test, meaning that there is a link between these two variables, but we cannot conclude that one is causing the other one. Okay, so I hope this is clear. If it's not, nanti lagi when we go into the core studies there will be some studies yang pakai correlation. So I will elaborate further on that. Okay? Alright, now key terms. Key terms for correlation ada dua. I'm pretty sure you have heard this in maths class. Positive correlation and negative correlation. So correlation can give out a positive effects or negative correlation. So positive correlation means the relationship between variable in which an increase in one accompanies an increase in the other one. So the two variable increase together. So positive correlation means when one variable increases, the other one also increases. Okay, so for example, if attention in class increases, the test score also increases. Okay, so now I think it's better kalau you actually Google how the correlation looks like. There's a graph that show positive correlation. You can Google it after this. So positive correlation, the line itu would go up. Okay, you would see positive correlation. It would goes up to the right lah. Okay, kalau negative correlation, it's the opposite. Negative correlation is when the relationship between two variables, which an increase in one accompanies a decrease in the other one. So satu naik, satu turun. Okay, kalau positif tadi dua-dua naik. So meaning that macam you pay attention in class increases, but your test score decreases. So when this happens, it becomes a negative correlation. Okay. So highest score on one variable correspond with lowest scores on the other. So one variable increases, the other one decreases. That would be negative correlation. Okay. So for correlation, you just have to know whether the correlation is positive or negative. Okay. So we've pretty much covered all the experimental methods already and the non-experimental method. So we already went through like the important component of a research method. In the next lesson, we will go into component of experiments lagi. Again, there's more terms to learn because research method anaknya there's a lot of terms that we need to understand first before we go into the real core studies. Okay. Alright, so I hope today is a good lesson that you're able to understand it. But don't worry, I will provide a Q&A in the exit ticket for you to answer the question. So after you finish this, you can continue with your discussion with your group member about the advantages and disadvantages of lab and filato. And I will provide a Google form for you to input all your findings, and then I will share it in my next lesson. Okay, so yeah, thank you everyone for today. I'll talk to you guys again in another video tomorrow, inshallah. Okay, all right.